Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new TalkX session. I'm Marta del Amo, Editor-in-Chief for MIT Technology Review Spanish edition, and it is my pleasure to join you today and be your host. TalkX is an initiative offered by Explorer, an entrepreneurship program in which participants acquire the entrepreneurial skills they need to transform an idea into a viable business. Thanks to Explorer, they can connect with more than 1,000 entrepreneurs and attend keynotes by high-level speakers such as Steve Blank and Marta Zepeda, which will be joining us today. The program lasts for 12 weeks and is completely free thanks to the funding from Santander universities. The current edition started last September in Argentina, Chile, Spain, and Mexico, and a new one will start in January, including Brazil and Portugal. If you are interested in the Explorer program, I encourage you to look for more information to attend the next edition. And now I would like to inaugurate this TalkX session in which we will delve into innovation focus of empowering communities to help each other to meet their needs. And for this, today we have with us the co-founder and managing director of Zebras Unite, Marta Zepeda. Zebras Unite is an international and intersectional hybrid cooperative creating the capital, culture, and community for the next economy. Marta is a system entrepreneur and a serial social entrepreneur, and she has also co-founded and was the founding board chair of Business for a Better Portland, a progressive business organization, and Accelerate, an entrepreneurship support organization for Oregon women entrepreneurs. Marta, very welcome to this TalkX session, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Marta. It's wonderful to be here.
Okay, we are going to now to explore all your background and all the work that you are doing through Zebras Unite. So to introduce you to our audience, could you tell us what Zebras Unite is all about? I want to know its philosophy and how does it deliver impact?
Sure. Well, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you all. And I'm so excited to share what we've learned at Zebras Unite. Zebras is pronounced zebras around the rest of the world. So I will do my best to pronounce it that way today. The movement began about 2017. 4 women co-founders, so I'm one of 4 women co-founders, came together. We were all experiencing the same challenges when it comes to being an entrepreneur. We were not finding the aligned capital that we needed for our businesses. As many of you know, and I'll be speaking mostly today from a perspective that reflects the United States. I know each person's culture is very specific. Mm-hmm. But for those of you that are familiar with Silicon Valley and the way that startup culture is reflected in the United States culture, we had difficulty finding aligned capital for our businesses. We didn't find the community of like-minded entrepreneurs. We didn't really consider ourselves social impact entrepreneurs, which I'll speak about a little bit more. But we were building our businesses in a very community-focused way. We were serving sectors that were critical to democracy, sectors like journalism and education. And those sectors are not well aligned for models like venture capital because you don't want to exit and make $1 billion. You're looking for—
I know it very well.
Yeah, I would love to hear your perspective on it. So basically we were also building profitable companies. We were building companies that were Black and white. They were for profit and they were for purpose. And we simply couldn't find what we were looking for. So we banded together and we wrote a manifesto called Zebras Fix What Unicorns Break. And in it, we basically argued for a different type of company rather than winner takes all, where investors are, the design is for investors to get rich and for a few to get wealthy. We were very interested in structures that were more cooperative and mutualistic, where many of the stakeholders could benefit, where we were thinking more about community shared prosperity and how we create more long-term economic development for our communities. And so we put this manifesto out into the world, Zebras Fix What Unicorns Break. And we heard from tens of thousands of investors and founders from around the world. And they basically said, what you've described is exactly what we are looking for. So we gathered a convening of them in 2017. And long story short, fast forward to now, we are now a hybrid cooperative. We have a nonprofit and we also have a cooperative. And that cooperative allows us to have multiple stakeholders at the table to contribute, to benefit, and to own the movement. So that's a little bit of background about the organization.
I'm a little bit gossip, but I would like to know, how do you found each other? I mean, for women with the same problems, were you typing in a forum or something?
I guess in order of sequence, Jennifer Brandel and I were both radio reporters. So our background is as radio reporters, which means that as we became entrepreneurs, that skill served us very well because we're very curious people and we ask a lot of questions. And in the process of asking questions about broken systems, you learn quite a lot. And so the two of us reconnected at a conference. Astrid Schultz, who's another co-founder of ours, happened to be at the same conference. And so we connected with her. She's based in Portland. And then Ania Williams, I met at another conference. And so it was sort of this springtime of reconnecting with one another at conferences and, just recounting our struggles. And it was the same struggle. And we realized like, this is a common pattern. This frustration is a shared frustration. And so, the best way to complain is to make things. And so that's what we did. We decided to put our experience out in the world to see if it would resonate with others.
Okay. Quick advice then: to attend conference, to talk to people, to do networking. Sometimes we forget about, but it's a very, very powerful tool to meet other people and grow. So Mara is the perfect example.
Be sure to complain about your experience because you'll find other people that are in it with you.
Okay, let's go back to the social impact that you mentioned before. This is a topic we are very interested in. And from your background, I see you are very, very focused on social impact of companies. However, let's be honest, as you mentioned, you struggle to find investors until you launch your manifesto. Companies tend to be more focused on growth and profit. How does an organization manage to combine effective growth with generating a positive social impact?
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is I believe that every company is a social impact company. So I don't, when you think about a company, right, that company is making certain people money, or maybe it's taking certain resources away from a community. Maybe it's bringing certain resources to a community. Maybe it's receiving certain government tax credits and benefits. Maybe its sector is something that needs certain tax benefits. Maybe it's providing healthcare for its employees. Maybe it's treating all of its employees as contractors. So I think the first myth that I wish to dispel is that we use this term social impact company as though it's just a certain subset of companies, but that's actually not true. Every company has a social impact. And it's embedded in their culture and how they do things. So that's the first thing that I would say. What we began to look at essentially, and where research has really advanced over the last few years, especially, is that we asked the question, how do companies become more socially conscious? And there's research that's done by an organization called MSI Integrity. And MSI means multi-stakeholder initiative. And these were very popular in the 80s and 90s when it became clear that corporations were engaging in very negative practices. And they said, okay, hold on. We, don't fine us. What we're going to do is create these things called MSIs. And so you had voices from non-governmental organizations, from policymakers, and they all came around the table with the hope of designing more positive impact for the community and lessening the negative impact of the corporations. Why this research is so important to us and why I encourage everyone to check it out is because what it found is fundamentally those conglomerations of people changed nothing because it didn't address the core issue of ownership and governance. And by governance, I mean who has power and who is making decisions. And so that research allowed us essentially to catapult our thinking because it was done retrospectively over the last 30 years. And essentially what it said is the most important things that we can look at, the most important factors of social impact come down to ownership, who owns it, and how is the financing designed to either exclude people or include people, and governance. By that, we mean who has the power to make decisions. So what we think about now when it comes to social impact is essentially a real laser focus on those two issues: who owns it and who benefits, and who is in the power to change things there. And then that opens up a landscape of possibilities. You can begin to think about employees as stakeholders. If you're a membership or you have users, your users are stakeholders. Maybe it's your community or the environment or the suppliers that you work with and the vendors that you work with. So now we begin to open up the idea of stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders at the table? How do they own the enterprise, and how does their voice play a role in the governance? And so that's really where we focus when it comes to social impact, because it begins to align incentives now. You're really looking at the core issue, which is who financially benefits and who has power. And that's kind of the nucleus of from where everything else is born.
Okay, but let's talk about those incentives you mentioned. I mean,
Yeah.
if you want to change the mind, I mean, not new startups and new companies, but if you want to change the mind of old companies, traditional companies, those dinosaurs we all know, how would you use this argument?
Sure. Well, I think there's companies are always at different stages, right? So we'll walk through a couple of case studies. You have a case study like MailChimp, which maybe people heard of last week, right? MailChimp was a bootstrap company, meaning it didn't raise any venture capital. It was founded by a couple of co-founders. They just sold to Intuit, which is a very large financial platform in the United States, for $12 billion. And so they thought they were a bootstrapped company, and then it became clear that they were going to sell. They contributed very generously to their employees' retirement plans. They put in the maximum cap, but still somebody walked away from, I think the company was 20, 25 years old. A small number of founders walked away with something like $12 billion. So you had a company that in many ways stood for Zebra values and now potentially had to re-examine what the financial upside was. So that's an example of where there are questions that arise around who actually created the value and how might they have received upside. And it's not a clear black and white issue. For those of you that know, if you are an employee that wants to participate in stock options, those options are tied to the valuation of the company, and it can be prohibitively expensive to exercise your options, is what it's called. So there's not a black and white issue for MailChimp. On the other extreme, you look at something like Drivers Cooperative, which just this year, just in fact a couple of weeks ago, was named as the largest worker owner cooperative in the US. It's an alternative to Uber and Lyft. So it was piloted and it started in New York and is based in New York. I think it has something like 2,000 or 3,000 worker owners who are drivers. So imagine if Uber or Lyft was driver owned, right? That would be an incredible shift. A challenge there is that they needed to raise aligned financing, and they were outside of the purview of impact investors, because impact investors don't yet think of stakeholder ownership as being impact, which is very great. So they did a crowdfunding campaign on a platform called WeFunder. And it was only possible to do that crowdfunding campaign because they changed the rules at WeFunder, and because WeFunder had worked for 12 years previously to change crowdfunding rules. Right? So I say this to say that right now what we are seeing, we're living through a time of extraordinary experimentation. Another example is the cohort that we led called Exit to Community, which was about 29 companies in the States that may have incorporated as a nonprofit, and then they realized they had a profit arm. They may have incorporated as a for-profit, and then they realized that they needed to be cooperatively owned rather than the traditional structure. So you also have a category, an archetype of another type of company, an entrepreneur, where they may have incorporated as one thing, and then they're realizing that they need to be something else. So I wish that there was a straightforward answer to your question. The reality is you have companies at all different stages, and each stage, the more that we're able to document the case studies and understand who benefits and how it works, then we're able to design better capital instruments and better experiences for founders that align with their values.
Okay. That's very, very, very good examples. Thank you very much. I have a deep learning now about this. And you mentioned as well that this is a very experimental moment about this. I would like you to share with us the trends that you are feeling and you notice from entrepreneurs and employees and customers when it comes to the type of companies they are building and what they want to buy and support?
Yeah, so in terms of the trends, I think one thing that we're seeing from the pandemic, which I'm sure all of you have experienced, is we are completely reimagining the way that we work, right? So we couldn't have asked for a more profound seismic shift in thinking about the future of work. And what we're coming to see essentially is that the 40-hour work week, or, I know that it's different in Europe and other countries, but that's not working for people. It's especially not working for working mothers that don't have access to childcare, for families that have children. So by definition, we're starting to see that companies that are more flexible around their approach to work are going to retain the highest qualified workers because they want to work in an environment that is actively reconsidering the role of the company in life. I think another trend that we're seeing is employees want to know quite clearly when they join a company, how do I have a voice in this operation? And it's not just a voice, it's a different dynamic, I would say, than traditional unions. People are not necessarily coming from a posture of aggression or wanting to I think the trend that I see is that people are wanting to deeply contribute. They're wanting to be meaningful contributors where their ideas are respected and where people have ideas that would greatly improve the company's social impact or bottom line. And they ask the question of boards and of the HR department, how is my voice going to be heard and how will I be a meaningful contributor to the vision of this company? So I think the companies that are able to figure that out are going to just end up being more competitive. And I would say the third is, there's this notion of all of us now can no longer ignore the impacts of climate change and our environment. And so it isn't even like your company, this issue of claiming sustainability, it goes much further than that, right? Because we're now all living through the environmental crisis. And so it's not only what you outwardly project, it also has to do with how you treat your company employees, your stakeholders, and how you're working together to be more responsive to our environmental crisis. And so it has to do with really embodying the crisis that we're living in and coming together internally to figure out what each person's experience is and how they want to have impact.
Okay, so we will have flexibility, contribution from the employees, and climate change or sustainability, or at least environmental impact, like the three biggest trends you see. I think flexibility is like the most, we can see it, at least the way we are working is changing. Now I'm at home, full person remote. For me, it's awesome, I love it. But the thing is, I think it's a trend that we are more used to hear it since the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of options do have a company to give more voice to their employees?
Mm-hmm.
What's the formula?
Yeah, I think a couple. One is I would encourage everyone to look at alternative governance structures. So if you go to a website called community.rule, that is a website by Nathan Schneider, who does a lot of research out of the University of Colorado Boulder and is also one of our board members and coined the exit to community idea and term. And that website gives you templates for how you make decisions. So as an example, it could be a do-ocracy. And a do-ocracy is the person that does it is the person that gets to make a decision, right? It could be consensus-based, where in order to make a decision, your culture is that you have consensus. It could be a consent-based culture. And what that means is that in order to make a decision, you consult people and you get their consent or dissent. So I think the first step that I would encourage is explore different ways of making decisions and then begin to workshop those in your company and say, I don't know that how might managers implement a different structure? Or what are the ways that employees might be responsive for how we make decisions here? At Zebras Unite, we chose a governance operating system called sociocracy. And the way that sociocracy works is that essentially each person has autonomy to some degree over the domain that they oversee. So whether that's operations or legal or membership. And then when we come together in what's called the general circle, when we have to make big decisions and we go through a consultative process. So I encourage you to check out the website. It's called Sociocracy for All. They have wonderful free trainings as well. And basically what you come to see is that the shape of power structures takes on a different visual. So we think of power, as this triangle where you have the person at the top, and then that bridges out to the next level of C-suite and management and the employees and so on. The shape of these power structures looks different. For us, it's a bunch of circles, and then we come together in a mega circle, right? So I think the one piece of advice that I can share is the easiest and most energizing place to start is to ask yourselves, how are we making decisions as a team? How might we begin to make decisions differently so people feel more autonomy, power, ownership, creativity? And then what are the different shapes and styles of decision-making that we might wish to adopt? And there are so many resources out there to support that exploration.
Okay, Mara, but be honest, nobody's listening to us, we are alone. What do you do when you face an opinion or an idea and that is not going to work? How do you react?
Do you mean internally?
Yes.
I mean, I don't think that I don't know that I even have that reaction anymore to I guess I'll back up and say, speaking very personally and vulnerably, what I say very often is co-op work is inner work. So my past experience is I was a venture funded startup founder with a software. I've been through venture funding. I know what that's like. And that power model is by and large, the founders are shouldering the weight of every decision, and it becomes crushing. And you read about the mental health crisis in startups around that financing and that power structure and everything. With co-ops, it's very different because, to your question, it's not that something is not going to work. It's an opportunity to have a conversation and to begin to adopt these principles of perspective taking. So I need to really understand what Marta's idea is. And so I need to get in a place where I can let go of my ego or my assumptions or my past experience or my judgment to understand that Marta's idea is every employee needs a telescope. And so, which we share.
We share, yeah.
And so when you take that posture, then it means that skills like conflict resolution and really deep listening, I would say deep listening is the core practice that I lean on, and going into difficult places to say, this is triggering for me, or I don't understand, or I have had a terrible past experience with telescopes, whatever it is, but we actually need to talk through it. And so it opens up a place of possibility and conversation. And that's been the most profound work for me working in cooperatives, is it's a really transformational inner experience as well.
That's remind me a lot. I mean, all these ideas that you are sharing with us, which are beautiful. I mean, they underlie the importance of soft skills for the future. I mean, in that process, you are not talking about technical skills at any time. It's like be comprehensive, be nice, to understand, to listen. Can you tell us about the importance of soft skills within this ecosystem?
Yeah, well, it reminds me of something I was listening to earlier today. We are so biased towards visual documentation. So when you think about if you think about audio information, what comes through our ears and what comes through our eyes, visual information, we are so biased towards visual information. Think of how many PDFs and decks and documents and Word documents and websites and tweets and Facebook, we are saturated with visual stimulation. And this makes sense. The printing press came along 400 years before audio technology evolved, and we had the ability to have, sound recordings and things like that. And so I guess I would rephrase it as soft skills. I would almost challenge people to think about it in another way, which is visual and auditory. And if you put aside for a minute the visual input that you get and you think about the sound waves as intelligence, the sound of a person's voice, their cadence, the tone, the resonance, whether they're breathing, you notice whether people are breathing in a calm fashion or they're hyperventilating. The tension, how fast they're speaking, this carries a tremendous amount of intelligence that we do not have a language for, because the first thing you'd want to do is document it visually, and you would then lose literally the resonance, the sound waves of the experience. The person whose work comes closest to this is a woman named Nora Bateson, who has something called the Warm Data Lab. And warm data is the quality of your voice in the room with the plant versus the quality of my voice in the room with the fireplace. And essentially what you begin to notice is there's an entire intelligence of sonic information that makes us uniquely human, that if we are able to more deeply listen to, that becomes the intelligence. So I guess I would just encourage a reframing of soft skills and think of it as a different sensory perception. And I think some of us, more and more people every day, really are becoming tuned in to like the frequencies of information being equally important to the content of information, which is often what we get barraged with visually.
Okay, Mara, you are blowing my mind. I think it's the first time I hear this speech, so I'm going to look deeper into this because I think it's very, very interesting. We are going to save like 10 minutes for a question from the audience. I hope you are sending your questions through the chat or something and we will start answering them in like 5 minutes. But before, I would like to ask you about something you mentioned when we have the last meeting. It was an internal meeting, and you were mentioned about the zebra concept against the unicorn concept, and I would like you to develop a little bit about that. Why zebras instead of unicorn?
Sure. Well, what we said essentially is that zebras, unlike unicorns, are real. So we'll start there. That these are companies that exist. And it's actually, if you look at the research, the majority of companies, if you think about that statistic that 99 out of 100 startups fail, it's not that they fail, it's that 99 other companies did not pattern match the VC-funded venture-backed model. But that does not mean that they are failures. So if we have this one unicorn over here and 99 other extraordinary ideas, our investment should become, how do we help those other 99 companies to contribute to bring their creativity and solutions to the world? Unicorns, tend to have this hockey stick growth, which very oftentimes is kind of artificially hacked with paid advertising or things like that. And you see Zebra co-founders are really looking for long-term, authentic relationships with their customers. When you have an exit for a unicorn company, very few people benefit by virtue of the way that investment works. You basically have to be rich in order to be an investor. So that exit just recompounds that wealth. Zebra companies are interested in how that wealth can be greater distributed. You tend to see unicorn companies that are very focused on like scalable, replicable products. Zebra companies are very often looking at systems and processes. So it's not only what we do, but it's how we do it. And then another thing that you see with Zebra companies is they want to be mutualistic. So their worldview and their orientation is one of cooperation instead of competition. It simply they're not motivated by, their mindset is not, I want to be competitive, I want to be the market dominator, I want to win, I want to be it's not kind of this singular focus on being the biggest fish. the mindset of a zebra entrepreneur tends to be more cooperative and mutualistic. And frankly, like, it's because a lot of us were artists who did projects with friends, and you know what it feels like to be in a band or to stay up late and make something with friends and people that you really vibe with. Like, there's no replacing that type of energy, and it really, for me, it defines what it means to be alive. And so they are looking for their businesses as a channel of that vibrancy and creativity and self-actualization and communion and fulfillment and relationship. And that's just not the orientation of unicorn founders. So it's not, we don't think of it as like a better or worse, or we're not interested in getting rid of venture capital, because it's certainly a very valuable tool for certain types of companies. But what we are saying is we have explicitly noticed this other pattern. And this comes down to Darwin's, there's competition, which the, survival of the fittest, which we've always heard about. And we've always presumed that that means a singular, organism who has the best equipment to deal with it. But what that actually means, if you look more closely at Darwin's work, is fitness is also defined by our ability to cooperate and work with one another. And that narrative has been erased from, American capitalism because it wouldn't work. So I think if we can come to redefine our fitness from a place of cooperation and mutualism, everything that all of us have been yearning for in this moment that feels so broken might have a chance of being repaired.
Okay, Mara, you are going to make me cry. I've told you, it's so good to see that kind of a speech in the business sector, like trying to do good things for the world, good things for the employees, for all the shareholders, as you mentioned. And thank you very much for sharing all this insight with us. Now it's time for the audience, which is sending questions from since a little bit time. So I will let them talk. Yeah, the questions. Okay. I don't know how to pronounce the name. GM Gabriela Elene. Okay. She asked, how could a zebra deal with competition, avoiding to become a unicorn type?
Do you mind repeating the question? Sorry.
How could a zebra deal with competition, avoiding to become a unicorn type?
Okay. I think the way that we've dealt with it is that, competition, especially in this space, it's more often than not that they're just approaching something from a different angle. And so then the work becomes, how do we cooperate and work with one another? And so I guess that's what I would say is, for us, it's meant we forged over 36 strategic partnerships with other organizations in our space, because we recognize that they offer something that's different, that might be more resonant with some of our members, right? So I think that the way that to deal with competition for us has been to create really novel creative structures for how do we cooperate with them? How do we work with them? How do we create mutually beneficial experiences? So it might be that, for example, people ask us all the time, like, you should have your own course on alternative fundraising. Well, there are tons of courses out there on alternative fundraising, but they probably don't have as large of an audience as we do at Zebras Unite, And so our solution then becomes, let's find those courses, see which ones really are aligned with our community, offer those, and then we'll create some type of revenue share, where we'll get a certain percentage of the members of the zebra community that register, right? So that's an example of a mutualistic process that is born out of what might be perceived as, there might be a different orientation, which is, okay, we're going to go build our own alternative fundraising course. And so rather than go to that impulse, the impulse becomes, how do we cooperate with that really important service provider that may just be looking for a larger audience?
Okay, the zebra concept has gained a lot of attention because we have another question about it from the same user. What's the main advantage of zebra against a unicorn?
The main advantage? I mean, I don't know. I think yeah, I think it goes back to what I just described with you, Marta. It's like, you are just a certain type of person. And if you're a certain type of person who feels enlivened by working in community and working in collaboration, then you'll feel more alive over here with the zebra community. So the whole question really comes down to how we feel in our bodies, right? And so if your body and if your being is one in which your wellness is improved by working in community, then you are likely a zebra. If you have a constitution that may have been raised in an environment where you were told that to be the best, you had to win, and where you're motivated by winning and competition and wealth and things being yours, then you are probably may very likely be happier kind of working within those existing models of unicorn models. And again, I say this with no judgment because I've met both types of people. I'm friends with both types of people. I love them both equally. But I guess that's what I would say is that it really comes down to like what we're here to do is be in service to people finding their people. And so that's what's most important to me. If you feel aligned with unicorn values, it's very important to go there and to learn from that space. And if you feel aligned with what we're speaking about, then we welcome you with open arms. And I should mention we have 25 chapters around the world, including in Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, and Mexico City. And so if you go on our website, zebras.coop/chapters, you can find those chapter leads. So our movement is also very international. We have a lot of respect for and appreciation for, and most of all, curiosity about how other cultures are making the zebra ethos their own.
Okay. So it depends on the person. That's it. Not better, not worse.
Not better, not worse.
Next question, Edgar Moto, 98. What recommendation would you give to an entrepreneur that is about to raise a capital for a pre-seed fund?
I mean, I guess my question would be to, I guess my advice would be, and it's only coming from my own experience. One is to just get to know your investors very well. So you want to take smart money, as they say. You don't just want to take any money that's thrown at you. So you are interviewing the investors just as much as they are interviewing you. So questions like, what are your values? How do you support founders? Are there founders that you funded that I can talk to for references to see how you've shown up? How do you add value? What types of connections do you make? There are so many really important questions to ask investors as well. So I would say that it is a gift for investors to be able to invest in your company, and you should come at it from a posture of you having something very valuable. And so the people that are coming need to be very aligned with you. That's what I would say on the investor side of things. Yeah. I mean, in terms of more deeply, I would ask yourself, why are you raising capital? And just to be really honest, people raise capital because that's what they're told to do in the startup world. And that's not the path of many founders. You might ask yourself, how else can I make the capital that I need in order to fund this business? If you might consider bootstrapping. There's a lot of intellectual property and capital that you probably have that you haven't considered to be a financial asset. But if you think about, offering services, offering consulting in your area of expertise, that's a phenomenal way of bootstrapping a company, which I can share offline. So I would really just question, what are your motivations for capital? And do you frankly see the signs? If you're raising venture capital, if you're raising equity, you need to see the signs of product market fit and traction in order to really be able to, with confidence, deliver on the return expectations that venture capitalists have. So if you aren't seeing those signs, or if you have any doubt in your heart that financing is misaligned with where you are from a growth perspective, listen to that voice, because that's, if you don't listen to that voice now, it's going to have so many repercussions down the line.
Very, very, very interesting advice, Mara. Interview your investors. For example, I always think about investing in companies, and the only thing that I look for is to share values with the company. It's the only thing that I look for. So very, very, very interesting. Okay, next question. Alba Mezcua say, hi, Maria. In my case, for example, we are creating a product for people with cerebral palsy. I hope I'm pronouncing correctly. And we will love to make it free or very accessible. How could we make sure to be socially responsible about this and still be a viable company in what comes to profit and paying the people in the team?
I mean, I would there I would try to look for as many models as possible of other companies that work in spaces of people who are differently abled. If I'm hearing correctly, it's cerebral palsy. So I would do like put on your researcher hat and go out and try to find as many companies. One example is I think it's called assistive technology products. They decided to crowdfund. So because they wanted to raise from a community, that they build kind of like their wheelchairs, but they're just much more mobile and able to get around. And so crowdfunding was very aligned with their product because they had so many people experiencing the problem of having imperfect wheelchairs that it made sense for them to raise money from the community of customers that had this problem because they got it right away, right? So, one piece of advice I would say is look to other companies that are serving the similar communities and look at what their fundraising journey has been. Very oftentimes you'll find they might partner with nonprofits as an example. And so they're able to get some grant funding for research and development. And so that creates, they're not taking equity, they're not selling off chunks of their company early on, but they're able to say, we want to do a prototype, we want to do a pilot, we want to experiment, we want to create research or education around this issue. And that allows you to get non-dilutive grant funding early on because there's so much grant funding available for issues like that. So I would say just find, give yourself a week and see if you can come up with like 5 to 10 case studies of other companies that are in a similar space and see if you can create, what types of financing did they raise? Who did they raise it from? What were their challenges? Listen to some of the talks by the founders. You can write the founders and say, how are you incorporated? Are you a nonprofit? Are you a for-profit? Do you have a fiscal sponsor? Did you take grant funding? Founders will oftentimes very easily speak about their journey. So ask to interview them. And this gets back to the listening, right? Listen to what their experience is, and that might give you some more signals for where to go.
Okay, Mara, you solve everything by interviewing people, I guess.
Yeah, you know this, Marta. You've seen it as well. That's what you do.
Okay, next question. Ige Diaz asks, which is the difference between Asoka, social entrepreneurs, and Zebras Unite?
It's a question I get often and I need to have a better answer. So I'm listening now to the fact that I need to have a better answer for this. I'll just say this. Social entrepreneurship and social impact investing, by and large, is focused on the developing world. They're focused on questions like hunger and climate, and a lot of their investment is looking for venture-style returns. So if you just Google social enterprise venture capital investing, you will find so many essays and op-eds written about how social impact, social enterprise is really a misnomer because those funds that fund social impact have become so close to traditional venture capital. They're looking for venture style returns, but they put the label of social impact and social enterprise. And so the four of us started, we thought the same thing when we were first starting our companies. It's like Jen was working in journalism and media. I was working in higher education. Astrid was working on the UN Sustainability Development Goals. And we started to go to conferences like CoOp, which bring together social entrepreneurs. And it was like, there was no money there. They didn't understand that you could do social impact investing in the States. And they were very laser focused on venture style returns and taking equity. So I have mixed feelings about that space. I have yet to see people that self-identify as social impact investors doing anything that's by and large any different, frankly, from venture capitalists. It's just they have a different name. So what I would say about, Zebras Unite is we very much we're like, there's a whole set of sectors and founders that are not being served by the existing capital supply that's coming from social enterprise, social impact. And what we were seeing, which validated this, was there are a ton of investors and banks and credit unions and financial institutions that are seeing that if they just get into this chasm of space and begin to think about more creative investments, there's a huge potential upside, financial upside for them. So if you imagine, you know, there's what they call, the Kauffman Foundation has done a lot of research on this. It's called the capital chasm. You have venture capital here, which is, you know, 1% of the market. You have loans, commercial loans over here, and 85% of entrepreneurs are not served by either of those products. So the majority of entrepreneurs are not served by the capital instruments that currently exist. And so I think there's two different approaches. One is you can go over here to the venture capital and you can say, look for different outcomes, modify your model from 2 and 20, and you can move them here. Another option is to go over here to your massive financial institutions like Santander Bank, as an example, and say, what products and services do you have to fund startups that may lack credit or collateral? And how might you think more creatively about funding this massive space of innovation? And the last thing I'll say is that we've had far greater luck over here with large financial institutions to get them to think creatively about ideas like character-based lending, where loans are given not on credit and collateral, but on different different worthiness structures. There's just a lot more capital and creativity actually over here on the traditional institution side, which is exemplified by this event, honestly, right? So I think there's kind of a lot of creativity that remains around the capital product instruments. And Zebras Unite has actually been doing a lot of consulting with large financial institutions to help them to think about what are new products that they might create to serve this massive market that's not being served.
Okay, we are just it's time out, but we have a lot of questions. So yeah. I've been told that I can make another one, the last one. So let me see if I can choose, because there's another one about zebras and unicorns. I think, sorry, we talked about that enough.
Yes,
so, yeah. Okay. Yes, is minus. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't understand this avatar. What do you recommend to generate impact with a new value proposition?
Generate impact with a new value proposition. I guess one thing I would say is, again, listen. So just gather your stakeholders together. You sitting here today, you have your own bias and definition of what impact means and what value proposition means. And the first thing that I would do is question, that's your personal opinion of what impact means and what value proposition means. Have you done any listening to corroborate that your definition is shared by your employees, is shared by your end users? And so that's really what I would say is, I know that it's a philosophical question because you are making assumptions about what impact and value proposition is. So until you go through the process of interviewing people, of gathering people in a room, of saying, okay, let's whiteboard, what impact does this company have? What are our values? Does the impact align with our values? And then what is the value proposition? Until you have any type of alignment and consensus around the definition that you are using, you're starting from a flawed first principle. So there are many different ways to go about building that consensus. If you need help, feel free to reach out. But I think that's the most important part. You have to start with listening, and you have to continually listen to the sound waves. It's not a visual thing. It's not a PDF. It's not a document. It's not a dashboard. You will hear it in the voices of your end users and your employees. And that provides the most intelligence that you can lean on for those decisions.
Okay, interview yourself, interview your investors, interview your shareholders, interview everyone, and then you can have a successful company. No, yeah. I'm joking. Okay, thank you very much to all that you have joined us today. Now we're going to have a private session with 20 explorers, which they are going to be able to ask Mara directly. But thank you so much. For those who has joined us through Twitch, I hope you have enjoyed and you have extracted very valuable lessons for your companies, for your future, for most important, for the society and for the world. Thank you all and goodbye.